We usually think of sports as, you know, pure split-second instinct, like a batter swinging at a 100-mile-an-hour fastball,
Right.
or a quarterback dodging a blindside tackle, a race car driver swerving to avoid a 50-car pileup. It's, it's muscular, it's visceral, it's happening right there in the moment, completely devoid of conscious thought.
Yeah, you certainly don't picture those athletes sitting in a boardroom uh, mapping out 5-year strategic corporate restructuring plans while they're physically out there on the field.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is why today's deep dive is going to completely flip that script. We are looking at one of the most famous, highly decorated athletic careers in human history as exactly that, like a massive corporate restructuring disguised as a racing team. Okay, so let's unpack this. The subject is Michael Schumacher, legendary 7-time Formula One world champion. And we've pulled together this huge stack of F1 biographies, telemetry data, and transcripts from that phenomenal F1 TV documentary detailing his rise.
Yeah, that's a great documentary.
It really is.
Yeah.
But the lens we are viewing all of this through is something entirely unexpected.
It is. We're pairing all that racing history with a fascinating in-seed clinical psychology thesis by Nikolai Bank. It's titled Decisions in Motion: Unraveling the Dynamic Process of Executive Decision-Making Through a Psychodynamic Lens.
I cannot get over how well this pairing works.
Sure.
We're absolutely not just doing a sports recap today. We are taking clinical psychology research meant for, like, Fortune 500 CEOs.
Right.
And using it to decode Schumacher's historic 1996 move to Ferrari. So we're tracking his evolution from this raw, ferocious, highly intuitive driver into a strategic, calculated organizational leader.
Yeah.
And whether you are navigating a massive career pivot yourself or trying to lead a stubborn team, or you just want to understand how high-level decisions actually get made when millions of dollars are on the line, the insights here are phenomenal.
You really are.
Yeah.
And to even begin to grasp the sheer scale of the transformation Schumacher engineered at Ferrari, we have to isolate who he was when he first arrived on the grid. So the clinical research uses a very well-known cognitive framework to diagnose his early career. It's Daniel Kahnemann's concept of System 1 and System 2 thinking.
Oh, from the book Thinking, Fast and Slow.
Exactly. So System 1 being our fast, automatic, intuitive, and highly emotional decision-making engine. It operates with almost zero conscious cognitive effort.
Right.
The research paper actually refers to this state as intuition as knowing. It's instinctual pattern recognition. System 2, on the other hand, is the slow, effortful, logical, and deliberate process, the spreadsheet part of your brain.
Spreadsheet part, yeah.
And looking at the young Michael Schumacher, he is the absolute terrifying embodiment of System 1 on a racetrack.
Oh, absolutely. Let's put some color on that because his debut is legendary. It's 1991. He arrives at the Spa-Francorchamps circuit in Belgium to drive for the Jordan team. He's, what, 22 years old?
22, yeah.
He has never driven a Formula One car on a full Grand Prix circuit before.
Ever.
And Spa is this terrifying old-school track in the Ardennes forest with massive elevation changes and blind corners taken at 180 miles per hour. The documentary highlights just how absurd this weekend was. He doesn't ease into it.
No.
He just gets in the car and drives flat out. Zero fear, zero overthinking. He ends up qualifying 7th on the grid, which in a mid-tier Jordan car for a rookie is bordering on physically impossible.
It really is. And he was relying entirely on implicit learning there. He wasn't sitting in the cockpit calculating the physics of aerodynamics or, the thermal degradation of his tires.
Right.
His brain was processing millions of data points of sensory input automatically, just feeling the limit of the grip through his hands and the seat of his pants. And Mercedes had actually identified this anomaly in him earlier when he drove sports cars for them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was inherently faster, he somehow used less fuel, and he was ruthlessly efficient without even seeming to try.
Wow. And he took that ruthless, raw System 1 style straight to the Benetton team next. I mean, he didn't care about hierarchy or respect for the veterans. He immediately locked horns with Ayrton Senna.
Right.
And Senna was the reigning world champion, basically a demigod in the sport, and Schumacher would just dive down the inside of him under braking. Intimidation just didn't compute for him.
It didn't.
But that reliance on raw animal instinct comes with a massive dark side. You see it perfectly in the infamous 1994 Adelaide crash.
Oh, yeah. The stakes there just couldn't have been higher. It's the final race of the 1994 season. Schumacher is fighting Williams driver Damon Hill for the world championship. The pressure is astronomical.
Unimaginable pressure.
And during the race, Schumacher pushes just slightly too hard, makes a mistake, and slides off the track, hitting the concrete wall.
So he damages his suspension,
Yeah.
he knows his car is mortally wounded, and he violently wrestles the car back onto the track just as Damon Hill comes flying up behind him.
Yeah.
Hill sees an open gap on the inside of the next corner and dives in to take the lead, which would win Hill the championship.
Right. And in that split second, Schumacher doesn't evaluate the geopolitical ramifications of his next move. He doesn't consult a risk management matrix.
No spreadsheets there.
Exactly. System 1 perceives a mortal threat to his goal, and he instinctively turns his steering wheel directly into Damon Hill's path. They collide massively. Both cars are destroyed. Both are out of the race.
Right.
But because Schumacher entered that race with a 1-point lead in the standings, he wins his first world championship while standing behind a chain-link fence.
It was wildly controversial. Half the world thought he was a genius, and the other half thought he was a total villain. It was this uncompromising, aggressive, split-second survival reaction. But I actually have to push back on the clinical perspective here a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
Because the INSEAD thesis mentions that corporate executives often feel a sense of shame about relying on their gut intuition instead of hard empirical data.
Yeah.
Like they view System 1 as flawed or biased. But for a young Schumi, System 1 wasn't a flaw. It was his ultimate superpower.
Right.
It literally won him 2 world titles at Benetton. So why on earth would you try to change a formula that is actively making you the best in the world?
Well, the clinical data addresses that exact paradox. System 1 is undeniably fantastic for survival, and it is frequently brilliant for early career success where the problems you face are largely individual and technical.
Okay.
Be the fastest driver, close the biggest sale, write the best code.
The solo contributor stuff.
Exactly. But as you elevate to the senior executive levels, or as you become a reigning multi-time world champion with a huge target on your back, the nature of the problems fundamentally changes.
Right. The environment gets too big for just one person's gut feeling.
That's it. The complexity scales completely beyond what instinct can manage. You are no longer just driving a car, you are carrying the psychological and financial weight of a massive organization.
Oh, wow.
And the psychological research shows that over-relying on System 1 under that level of sustained, complex pressure leads directly to maladaptive threat responses.
Meaning what, exactly?
The brain simply gets overwhelmed by the anxiety of maintaining the status quo, and the executive starts making erratic, highly defensive choices just to survive the day. To survive at the very top, an individual has to evolve. They have to build structure. They have to transition to System 2.
Okay, looking at the pivotal year of 1996 through that lens completely changes the narrative for me. Because Schumacher does something that absolutely stunned the global sporting press. He leaves Benetton, where he has a dominant championship-winning car built entirely around him, and he signs with Ferrari.
Yeah.
And Ferrari is the most famous romantic name in motorsport, sure, but in 1996 they were an absolute disaster.
They really were.
They hadn't won a driver's championship in 17 years. Their cars were unreliable, the team politics were incredibly toxic, and the Italian press crucified them on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Rationally, objectively, moving to Ferrari looked like an insane career suicide mission. Leaving a guaranteed winner for a 17-year loser just makes zero sense. The only way I can comprehend this decision is if the sheer impossibility of the challenge was actually the point.
Well, the clinical research gives us a profound vocabulary for exactly that deduction. The thesis introduces a psychoanalytic concept called the transitional object.
Transitional object.
Yeah, the original theory comes from Donald Winnicott, a renowned pediatrician and psychoanalyst. He observed how young children use security blankets or teddy bears to soothe the intense, overwhelming anxiety of separating from their mothers. The object provides a tangible anchor in an uncertain world.
A literal security blanket.
Yes.
But scaling that up from a toddler in a crib to a ruthless Formula One driver or Fortune 500 CEO, I mean, that feels like a massive leap.
It sounds like it, but adults experience their own forms of massive separation anxiety. Particularly highly successful individuals leaving a known, triumphant environment for the complete unknown.
Right.
The clinical argument is that executives will subconsciously use a massive, overly complex decision or an impossibly huge rebuilding project as a psychological container for their anxiety.
Oh, I see.
The decision itself becomes the transitional object. It gives them a rigid structure to hold on to while they navigate the terror of an uncertain future.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
There is a quote cited in the research from the 12th century philosopher, the Maimonides, that just hits the nail on the head here. The risk of a wrong decision is preferable to the terror of indecision.
That's the one.
Because Schumacher was sitting at Benetton, facing the immense, creeping anxiety of figuring out how to maintain his status as the undisputed best in the world. The pressure to repeat is crushing.
Right, because if he stays at Benetton and eventually loses, it's a direct failure of his own talent. He had the best car, and he failed. But by choosing to completely rebuild Ferrari from the ground up, he manufactured a massive systemic project. He took all of that internal existential anxiety about his own longevity and channeled it outward into a structured, multi-year organizational goal.
So he basically negotiated a $30 million a year red Italian security blanket.
Pretty much.
By taking on the single most difficult, heavily scrutinized rebuilding project in the sport, he completely regained control over his own narrative. Like, think about the brilliance of that setup. If they lose, well, it's Ferrari. They've been losing for 2 decades. The cars are terrible. He's shielded. But if he actually manages to win, he becomes an immortal.
Exactly. The move was a psychological mechanism to manage the terror of the unknown. But, a transitional object only gets you through the front door.
Right.
Once he was physically in Maranello at the Ferrari headquarters, the security blanket only works if he actually executes the rebuild. He had to completely shed his solo, hyper-reactive System 1 identity and transform into a System 2 organizational leader.
And the documentaries highlight just how brutal that culture clash was at first. I mean, he arrived with this incredibly rigid, precise German approach. He expected everyone to just execute their jobs perfectly and fall in line. But Ferrari was this emotional, passionate, highly chaotic Italian family.
Very different vibe.
Very different. People were yelling, politics were rampant, and everyone was terrified of making a mistake because the local newspapers would demand they be fired the next morning. His old method of just driving faster to fix the problem wasn't working.
No, because he had walked into a culture dominated by what the clinical research calls survival anxiety.
Survival anxiety.
Yeah. And to fix it, he had to build what organizational psychologist Amy Edmondson defines as psychological safety. The data shows that for executive decision-making to be even remotely effective, there must be a foundation of deep trust between the leader and the employees.
Makes sense.
If an organization is run on fear, employees suffer from management fright.
Management fright. I love that term.
It's total organizational paralysis. Nobody takes a risk, nobody suggests a radical new idea, and nobody innovates because the penalty for failure is professional execution.
And to win in Formula One, stagnation is death. You have to innovate constantly. You have to engineer right on the bleeding edge of physics. So Schumacher realized he couldn't just be the fast guy in the cockpit anymore. The sources detail how he essentially became a third-team principal alongside Todt and Ross Brawn.
Yeah.
He fundamentally re-engineered the human psychology of the factory. He stayed at the garage until 2 a.m. going over telemetry. He organized weekly soccer games for the mechanics. He made it a point to memorize their wives' and children's names.
Wow.
He was systematically building an intense familial trust.
He was actively dismantling the survival anxiety within the ranks of Ferrari. By treating the mechanics as true equals and showing genuine, consistent interest in their lives, he was constructing a psychological safety net. He was telling them implicitly that it was safe to push the limits of engineering. Safe to try a radical new aerodynamic wing without the paralyzing fear of being publicly humiliated if the experiment failed on Sunday.
So what does this all mean for the mechanics in a practical sense? There's one specific incident in the F1 archives that absolutely crystallizes this transformation. It's the 1999 British Grand Prix at Silverstone.
Right.
Schumacher is fighting for the World Championship. He's flying down the hangar straight at 190 miles per hour, heading into Stowe Corner. He hits the brakes, and the pedal goes completely to the floor.
Oh, man.
Nothing happens. A tiny rear brake bleed nipple had failed. The car violently smashes head-on into the tire barrier. Schumacher shatters his leg in the impact. He has to be cut out of the car. His entire season is instantly over. The championship is just gone.
And, in a high-pressure corporate environment, facing investors or the press after a catastrophic failure like that is the exact moment a CEO might throw an underling to the wolves to save their own reputation.
Oh, 100%.
The Italian media was absolutely hounding him and the team, demanding to know whose fault it was. They wanted a scapegoat.
And he absolutely refused to give them one. Lying in a hospital bed with a broken leg, knowing his championship dreams were over, He publicly stated it was just the racing incident.
Incredible.
He never pointed a finger at the mechanic who bled the brakes. He took the immense physical trauma, but he completely shielded the organization from the public fallout.
Yeah.
You can just imagine what that did for the psychology of those mechanics. By taking the hit and protecting them, he is actively destroying their survival anxiety. If he had thrown that mechanic under the bus, the entire factory would have been terrified to ever build him an aggressive, innovative car again.
Exactly.
They would have built safe, slow, reliable tractors. But because he protected them, they felt empowered to build him an absolute rocket ship.
That moment is the epitome of a mature System 2 culture. He actively traded the short-term emotional release of venting his entirely justified frustration, which, would have been a classic System 1 reaction for a long-term, highly rational System 2 strategy of organizational cohesion.
Yeah.
And the return on that psychological investment was staggering. That deeply ingrained trust became the unbreakable foundation of their unprecedented run of 5 consecutive world championships from 2000 to 2004.
He literally re-engineered the minds of 1,000 Italians. It's an incredible leadership case study. But the deep dive wouldn't be intellectually honest if we just painted this as a perfect, flawless ascension to enlightenment.
No, it wouldn't.
We have to look at the shadows, because human psychology is incredibly messy, and you don't just install a System 2 software update and permanently delete System 1 from your hard drive.
You really don't. The primitive instinctual drives are always running in the background, and the clinical research explicitly addresses how anxiety disrupts executive decision-making.
Okay, how so?
The data shows that even the most highly disciplined, culturally evolved executives can be completely derailed by sudden, intense spikes of anxiety.
Really?
Yeah. When the human brain perceives a massive, immediate threat to its survival or its core identity, that anxiety actually physically disrupts the prefrontal cortex,
Right.
which is the biological home of our rational System 2 thinking.
So the system literally short circuits.
The cognitive override is instantaneous, the carefully constructed strategic thinking vanishes, the prefrontal cortex goes dark, and the executive reverts back to hasty, instinctual, and often highly maladaptive survival responses.
Oh, well.
And we see this biological hijacking happen to Schumacher on the track, even at the absolute height of his Ferrari dominance.
We do. The two glaring examples in the F1 history books are Jerez in 1997 and Monaco in 2006. Let's look at 1997. It's the final race of the season. He is fighting Jacques Villeneuve for the championship. Villeneuve makes a brilliant surprise overtaking move down the inside. And in a fraction of a second, feeling the championship literally slipping past his front wing, Schumacher jerks his steering wheel and deliberately crashes his Ferrari into the side of Villeneuve's car.
Yeah.
It was incredibly blatant. He was disqualified from the entire championship season as a penalty. But the documentary footage shows something bizarre. Immediately after the crash, walking back to the pits, Schumacher was genuinely, furiously convinced that Villeneuve had hit him. His brain had rewritten the narrative until he actually saw the television replay.
That is a textbook System 1 threat response acting under severe cognitive impairment. He didn't rationally sit in the cockpit and decide to permanently tarnish his global reputation.
Right.
His brain perceived an existential threat to his core identity as a winner, his prefrontal cortex shut down, and he reacted with a primitive animalistic defense mechanism. The threat response happened faster than conscious thought, and we saw a very similar neurological hijacking in 2006 at Monaco during qualifying.
Ah, yes, the infamous Rascasse incident. Schumacher has set the fastest qualifying time, which is crucial at Monaco because you can't pass during the race. But Fernando Alonso is flying around the track right behind him on a much faster lap.
Right.
So Schumacher enters the tightest corner on the track, Rascasse hairpin. He fumbles the steering and conveniently parks his car right against the guardrail, stalling the engine. It brings out the yellow flags, forcing Alonso to slow down and securing pole position for Schumacher.
Yeah.
The stewards reviewed the telemetry, saw he was only traveling at 10 miles an hour when he locked the brakes, and universally condemned it as a calculated cheat.
See, the clinical data provides such a clarifying lens for these moments. The researchers note that when hit with overwhelming anxiety, we literally lose the capacity to think, even if we desperately want to.
Oh, wow.
In those highly compressed, intensely high-stakes moments, the mature, strategic, System 2 CEO of Ferrari just evaporated. The overwhelming anxiety overrode his higher cognitive functions, and he instantly reverted back to the raw survival mode kid fighting for a go-karting seat in Germany.
In those split seconds of terror, the boardroom vanished, and he was just a cornered animal lashing out. It really matches that quote from the thesis, when hit with anxiety, we often can't think. It highlights how incredibly fragile our rational decision-making apparatus is, regardless of how much media training or corporate success we have accumulated.
It really does. Which brings up a universally applicable point for anyone navigating high-stakes environments. You have to build the self-awareness to recognize when your environment is triggering that latent survival anxiety.
Yeah.
If you feel that physical tightening in your chest and you make a massive decision from a place of panic, you are almost certainly relying on System 1 heuristics that are completely unsuited for the complexity of the problem you're trying to solve.
You don't have to be strapping into a carbon fiber missile at 200 miles per hour to experience this cognitive hijacking. If you are leading a team through a brutal layoff period, or you are staring down a terrifying career pivot, recognizing when you are reacting with a System 1 panic response versus planning with a System 2 foundation is the difference between surviving and thriving.
Absolutely.
And realizing that you can consciously use a major difficult project as a transitional object, a structured security blanket to channel your anxiety into something productive is a massive paradigm shift.
It all comes down to building a shared vocabulary around these psychological mechanisms. If a leadership team can openly articulate when they feel the culture sliding into survival anxiety, they can actively intervene before it metastasizes into management fright.
Before we wrap this up, there is one final, incredibly poignant layer to the inside research that we haven't brought in yet. It frames Schumacher's entire legacy in a completely different light.
Right. So the clinical studies surrounding intuition highlight a very specific emotional prerequisite. The research proves that human intuition, that brilliant, effortless System 1 pattern recognition that allowed Schumacher to drive a Jordan car beyond its physical limits at Spa, is deeply enhanced by a positive, relaxed mood.
Okay.
Conversely, severe chronic anxiety actively degrades and destroys that intuitive capacity.
So positive emotion is the fuel for intuition,
Yeah.
and anxiety is like water in the gas tank.
Precisely. Now, consider Schumacher's reputation. He was globally legendary for his relentless, uncompromising, almost punishing pursuit of perfection. He pushed his own physical limits and the psychological limits of every single engineer and mechanic at Ferrari to the absolute breaking point.
Yeah, he was intense.
That level of obsession inherently manufactures a constant high-pressure environment, absolutely steeped in chronic anxiety.
So by demanding absolute perfection and internalizing this crushing pressure to never ever lose a single race.
Did his obsession with winning actively wage war against the very intuitive brilliance that made him a champion in the first place?
Oh, wow.
Did the rigid, hyper-controlled environment he needed to build to soothe his own anxieties slowly erode the joyful, free-flowing, fearless instinct he displayed as a 22-year-old rookie?
That is.
It's a profound paradox that strikes at the heart of many highly driven individuals. The immense pressure you generate to protect your success can create the exact chronic anxiety that suffocates your greatest natural talents.
The very armor you build to protect yourself becomes a cage that stops you from moving. That is an incredibly heavy thought to sit with, and it completely reframed how we think about the cost of sustained greatness.
Yeah, it really does.
We started this deep dive talking about sports decisions looking like pure muscular instinct, but as we've seen, the reality is a multi-year, deeply psychological battle between our primitive fears and our strategic ambitions. Next time you are facing a massive, terrifying leap into the unknown, pause and ask yourself, are you lashing out in a System 1 panic? Or are you calmly building a System 2 foundation? And maybe, if the jump feels too big, don't be afraid to find yourself a massive red Italian security blanket to help you make it across.